Let me introduce our guest today. Our guest is Erik Krisle. Erik is a director at Leavitt Partners, which is a Salt Lake City consulting firm. Erik manages Leavitt Partners' data and analytics team and manages some data collection efforts and data asset management. He does a lot of good stuff with survey research, I know, because I know him from his days as a student. Prior to joining Leavitt Partner, he founded and operated a boutique data analytics consulting firm that specializes in survey research and statistical and economic modeling. And he has a master's degree in public policy from BYU and a bachelor's degree in political science from BYU, and is a former student and good friend. So please join me in welcoming Erik.
Thanks, Quinn. And I really appreciate the opportunity to come back and speak to all of you. I understand it's political science and international relations majors in the room. Is it anyone not a political science or international relations major? What majors do we have?
Economics.
Economics, okay.
Math ed.
Math ed, all right. So 3 of the 4 majors here I tried at political science or at BYU, and several others that weren't mentioned. I had a long route to get through my undergraduate education, and I have a passion for coming back and talking to students. And the juncture that you're at, it's an exciting time, and a lot of anxieties can be present, but also a lot of opportunities coming up. So I'm here to talk about a couple of things around the consulting industry. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview how I understand the consulting industry, and then tell you some of my own experience, how I got to where I am, and what Leavitt Partners does, or what Leavitt Partners, how it fits into the broader consulting industry. So, all right, how do we go here? So this first part, just an overview. We'll go through a classification and value proposition for consulting, what it means to consult at Leavitt Partners. And then I'll give you some ideas on how I got here. So why do organizations hire consultants? They're looking for information. They're looking for expertise. They're looking for insight. They're looking for execution. They're looking for someone to do something that they don't have the capabilities to do in-house, or somebody to inform decisions that they're making that they don't have the expertise in-house to do. So they either lack access to information, they lack expertise. There are a few different ways to classify consulting firms. Some people will talk about strategic versus operative. So strategic consulting firms, they focus on helping businesses have the information they need to make decisions and paint a path forward for success. Operative would be more active consulting, where the consultant is actually playing a function for the client. They're actually performing some duty that the client hasn't hired personnel to do directly, or implementing some strategy that was developed. Functional versus industry. So functional consulting firms line up across some capability. Data analytics firms, information technology firms, other types of functional consulting firms. And then industry consulting, which would be lining up on some topic. Leavitt Partners lines up in healthcare, but you could find just about every sector will have a number of firms that focus on consulting within that sector. And then there's boutique versus elite, right? So the boutique firms are smaller firms that have a real niche value proposition. They're really trying to narrowly answer a question that their clients ask, versus elite firms, which are big box consulting firms, your McKinsey's, BCG's, Bain, and the like, that really will take any question on any industry, and they'll put, they like to say they'll put athletes to work for you. So Leavitt Partners falls along these lines. We're more strategic than operative. We don't do We don't do implementation or boots on the ground consulting. We're focused on the C-suite. So our clients are executive level folks, board level folks who are trying to make decisions about where to take their organization. We're industry specific in healthcare. And I'd say we're more boutique than elite, but though we're growing probably somewhere in between those two, in that we have a national presence across a few offices. Gives you a little sense of where we fit into the broader consulting industry. Okay, so what does consulting look like at Leavitt Partners? I'm going to have to tell you a little bit of a story about where we come from, and then maybe it'll help you understand what we think consulting is. Leavitt Partners, we say that we're smart on value. So smart on value is a term. Value is a term that has become more and more important in healthcare. Traditionally, healthcare services were paid on a volume-based system, meaning that as you go to your doctor, every service that your doctor provides, or your hospital provides, or your healthcare provider provides, you get charged for each one of those services. It's a volume-based system where the provider is incentivized to continue to provide more and more services. Several years ago, there was a discussion around a term called value and whether or not we ought to be paying for value rather than volume. So Leavitt Partners is built on the idea that rather than simply thinking about all the things you could do, you ought to think about all the things that you could accomplish with healthcare services. And so we've been helping the industry interpret the movement to value, and specifically the economics around value. We were founded by Mike Leavitt. Mike Leavitt was former governor of Utah. He was here for 3 terms, 93 to 2003. Before that, he led the Leavitt Group, which is a large insurance brokerage, one of the largest in the nation, second largest in the nation. He left office here to take a position in the Bush administration. He led the EPA for a while, and then he was Secretary of Health and Human Services. And this is where the story of Leavitt Partners really gets started. As a cabinet member, Governor Leavitt had the opportunity to sit down every morning and receive the presidential intelligence briefings. And in those briefings, he was really struck by the idea that the intelligence community would take everything that's going on in the world and boil it down to one side of one sheet of paper that the president and the cabinet needed to know each day. Now, Governor Leavitt spent a lot of time really thinking about these briefings because he had to carry around this card in his pocket as a cabinet member. Now, a lot of really bad things would have to happen for the Secretary of Health to become president of the United States, but it is a possibility. And so he would carry around this card and be ready that at any moment somebody would call him and he'd have to crack this open and read off a code and he'd be sworn in as president. So he felt like really being aware of what was going on in these intelligence briefings was a critical part of his job. And the key thing that he learned from this intelligence community as they were sharing what was going on in the country is the importance of making sense of weak signals. I'm going to share a couple of stories. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor attack. The morning of Pearl Harbor, there were a series of events leading up to the attack that might have tipped off the American authorities to the fact that an attack was coming. So Japanese denial of all foreign requests to visit naval facilities preceded the event. On January 1st, the American ambassador, Guru, writes to Japan that Japan is on a warpath. February 5th, Secretary Knox warns that if hostilities with Japan would begin, they would probably attack Pearl Harbor. February 15th, Kimmel issues a fleet warning of a possible surprise attack. March 31st, joint estimate warning of possible attack on Oahu. November 1st and December 1st, 41, there's a change in call signs in the Japanese fleet. December 6th, now just the day before, sightings of Japanese ships in Cameron Bay sightings of unidentified ships in the Hawaiian waters. The morning of December 7th, U.S. intercepts Japanese messages threatening war. 6:40 that morning, there's a sinking of an unidentified submarine outside Pearl Harbor. 7 a.m., a detection of large number of ships, unidentified aircrafts approaching the base, and then 7:45, the bombing begins. There are a number of these events that any one of which may not have tipped off any concern of an imminent event in Pearl Harbor. But when looked at together in sequence, there's a clear story that leads to an imminent attack that ultimately left a fair number of our servicemen and women deceased. So weak signals. Bill Gates says we always tend to overestimate what's going to happen in the next couple of years. We tend to underestimate what's going to happen in the next 10 years. Leavitt Partners is trying to anticipate through weak signals what's going to happen in the next 10 years. Just a couple of business examples. 2008, Blockbuster video. Some of you may remember that. When I was at BYU, we still went to Blockbuster. Circuit City, one of the largest electronics retailers in the country, went out of business in 2010. And then Sears in 2018, filing for bankruptcy, one of the largest and most iconic brands in American history. At the same time, Amazon.com in 1994, they start selling books and other literature. They start selling more retail items. And then today, many of the retail giants that we see have really given way to an online platform. Were there weak signals that these entities could have been picking up on that they weren't picking up on and ultimately led to their disaster or their demise? Okay, so what does all this mean for Leavitt Partners and consulting? What we're trying to do is pick up information from the industry that helps us look around the corner, helps our clients look around the corner at things that they may not be seeing that are going to be important for their future success. We provide intelligence, cross-sectional intelligence across the industry, trends, data analytics, these kinds of hard skills. Wisdom, so this brings in subject matter expertise from folks who've spent careers in government and leadership roles. And then the value pathway, which is a specific topic of expertise that we've developed around this movement to value. 3 offices, Salt Lake, DC, and Chicago. Salt Lake is our largest office. Governor Leavitt wanted a legacy here in his home state, and so he set up headquarters here. DC.
Beautiful view.
It is.
The best office I've ever been in when you go up to the top level.
We're in the 23rd floor of the Wells Fargo Tower downtown, and we do enjoy it down there. Washington, D.C., we're on New Jersey Avenue across the street from Georgetown University and just down the street from the Capitol. A lot of folks out in D.C. spend their time specifically watching the weak signals out of government, or sometimes not so weak signals as they may be. We do a lot of alliance work there, and I'll talk more about that later, and a lot of policy consulting. And then we have a small presence in Chicago where we have a lot of clients and a lot of industry in Chicago are lined up around healthcare. So we service all sorts of clients, so investors, private equity firms, folks that are looking to put money into companies that are innovative in healthcare, government agencies, federal government, and state government. More on the state government side, but recently we've got a little more into federal contracting. Insurance companies, managed care companies, those that pay for insurance, healthcare providers, life sciences companies, pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, and the like. And then industry associations. We do a lot with folks who are representing broad swaths of the healthcare sector. All right, so let's talk career paths. There's the typical path, and then there's the path that I took. I'm going to share both, and then give you some thoughts on paths forward that you might have. All right, the typical path. So you'll notice the title of my slides was Consulting for Non-Business Majors, because traditionally consulting was a business major endeavor. You'd grow up in an undergraduate business degree. You'd work as an analyst for some organization, sometimes in consulting, sometimes in business. You'd go back, you'd get an MBA, and then you'd go into consulting, usually at the associate level for one of the big consulting firms. That's the tradition. Right now, consulting is ripe for disruption. We have a lot of new players coming on the market, and the traditional consulting value proposition is being put into question. High-priced consultants from big box consultancies are no longer preserving the value that they once did. So these companies are starting to carve out parts of their business to do separate functions. Back in 2007-8, McKinsey, which really is kind of the global leader in consulting, they generate more consulting revenue than anyone. They made a strategic change, and they built what they call McKinsey Services. And it's a data and analytics platform and other services that can be purchased through a self-serve platform, meaning that they provide you technology, they provide you data, and they provide you guidance on how to use that data. But ultimately, it's all happening at the organization, and you don't have a consultant, a high-priced consultant, on the ground. So what does that mean? It means that there's more opportunity for a broader set of skills to enter consulting today than there was in the past. I think this path still applies. The difference is that the degrees, the certificates that you have that feed into consulting is a lot broader. So your undergraduate degree in social sciences, economics, international relations become more valuable to the extent that you can apply them to something that is valuable for one of the services that these companies are providing. Just a note, you'll go into consulting, and we're talking about consulting today, but consulting is typically an early career or a mid-career out of a number of careers that somebody might have. It's usually not an end career. And what I mean by that is that people will spend time in consulting. They'll create a lot of relationships, and they'll add value to their clients, and then they'll move on to other things, industry. They'll work for a client that they used to work for. They'll move into industry, or they'll move into leadership, which keeps them in the consulting industry, but it's a job change, because now you're working on internal strategies and development rather than delivering consulting work. So it's something that you transition out of at some point in your career. The exception to that is folks who've spent their time in other careers and then come back into consulting later in their career. Those folks tend to be subject matter experts and opportunists later in their career, and so not really the focus of this conversation, but that is, we work with a lot of those kinds of people. So my path. So I grew up in San Bernardino, California. I went to Cajon High School. My high school, when I showed up as a freshman, there were 2,200 kids in class. I was class of 2000, dating myself a little bit. And they brought us into the auditorium, and they sat us down, and we were supposed to have this rah-rah speech about the class of the future, the class of 2000. This is the millennial class, right? And the principal, I'll never forget, he stood up and he talked about what could happen, and then he got really real about what circumstances were like where I grew up. And he asked us to look to our left, look to our right, look at the person behind us, and he said that statistics show that 3 of the 4 of you would not be here at graduation. And when I finished high school, we had 660 walk with us in graduation out of 2,200. So there wasn't a lot of talk about college, about career progression, about those kinds of aspirations when I was in high school. I remember my college or my high school advisor, they sit you down when you're a senior and try to make sure that you're going to graduate. And she looked over my grades and she said, "Wow, you do pretty good at math. You ought to think about applying. What colleges have you applied to?" And I my dad was blue collar, and it just really hadn't crossed my mind that I should be doing that. And so she had me apply. She said, "Well, you should apply to Pepperdine and Cal Poly San Luis Obispo." It took me about 10 minutes to figure out that Pepperdine was $50,000 a year, and so we applied to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And I became an engineering major because my math score said I should be an engineer. That lasted two quarters. They were on a quarter system. I quickly realized that I was in freshman orientation. They ran through the statistics of the incoming class, and I knew just enough about math to realize I had to be like the last guy they let in. Right, I was at the very bottom of the scores distributions and grades distributions, and quickly that proved out. It was a really tough year, and I didn't do particularly well. I then went and spent some time in South America as a missionary, and enjoyed my time there. Grew up a little bit, learned something about how to work and how to study. I came back and decided not to go back to Cal Poly. I went to the college near my hometown. Then I took a job at RIM Family Services. RIM Family Services was a behavioral health company that was doing crisis counseling for wildfires that had taken place in 2003. I did that for about a year, taking general eds at the local state college, realizing that I needed to do something a bit more, have a little more ambition if I wanted to take my career ahead. So I applied to BYU. First time I applied, I got a denial letter. About 6 months later, I decided to apply again, got another denial letter. In 2005, I decided to move to Utah and enroll in night classes. I was old enough then where it's a loophole. You can get into night classes, but you're not a degree-seeking student. And that semester, I committed myself to do the best I'd ever done academically. And I spent all of my time taking the 3 classes they would let me take and visiting the admissions office. And on the 3rd application, BYU reluctantly allowed me to attend. And I can tell you that this institution changed my life. Opened up doors and opportunities for me that I had not anticipated. While I was here, I like many of you, maybe, or many of the friends you know, spent some time knocking doors, doing door-to-door sales. I did it for several years. Never made the kind of money that they sometimes promise, but I did support my family. I was able to get married and have a couple of kids while going to school. And graduating in 2009 with my undergraduate degree wasn't a terribly good time to enter the job market. And so I kept working for a little while. And I learned something really interesting in that job. I started to get involved in some of the more strategic decisions about market selection and team building and those kinds of things. And I realized very quickly that industry was not necessarily using data the way they could to make decisions. They were making a lot of decisions based off of what felt right and committing a lot of resources to it, but they weren't necessarily using any sort of empirical evidence to justify those means. So that led me back to graduate school and the desire to build out my analytic skills. And so I came back to BYU for the Master's in Public Policy, which they no longer have here, but led by Sven Wilson. Quinn here let me tag along with him as a research assistant for a period of time. And I really spent my time in my my graduate degree trying to be the student that I thought I could be. Undergrad was really about survival and getting through. My graduate degree was about performance. And it was about doing the very best I could. One of the opportunities that led to was that as I was finishing school, I had a few different job opportunities, but I had a hard time kind of thinking about what to do. And I had the opportunity to do some consulting work with a couple of professors that you guys may know, Sven Wilson and Jay Goodliff. Sven called me. In fact, I was moving out of my house, packing up and putting things into storage to go out and do another year selling because I hadn't yet decided what I wanted to do after that, which was a little depressing after a graduate degree that I'd go back to that, but I thought it would be temporary and I'd go on to something else. And so as I was packing up to get out of my house, I had 3 kids at the time. Sven called me, asked me to go to lunch. We spent some time talking about opportunities he had to consult over the years. And so we formed a small group and spent some time over the next year providing consulting services to a number of entities. One of those was the state of Utah, who was working on a state innovation model requiring a financial analysis for several innovative approaches to healthcare reforms in the state. And so we worked with them, and we partnered with Leavitt Partners. My time working on that project led me to discussions with folks at Leavitt Partners and what they do, and ultimately the decision to come on full time there. Now, you might ask, why do I tell you all this? I think there's a couple of reasons. One is there's no direct path. And the paths that you all are on might be different, and you might have arrived at the decisions to major in the major you're in, and the school that you're at, and all of those things, sometimes as an accident of history. But there is a theme across this of looking for the next opportunity and looking for the relationships that are going to help you realize that next opportunity. So I'm going to walk a little bit through daily life. Quinn, let me check on time here. We're at a little after 5.
We need to be done at 5:20.
Done at 5:20?
So done with Q&A and everything at 5:20.
Okay, we'll go another 5 minutes or so here, and a little more than that, and then we can do questions. You will be hired for what you can say or what you can do. And I would say that in your early career, it's more about what you can do. There will be senior people that can say more than you, right? There will be people in their career that have more to say about the topics that you're learning about. If you learn anything in your undergraduate degree that can be helpful, it's to develop skills that you can immediately apply in your career as a contributor. Early career contributors are production-oriented. You're building slide decks, writing briefs, running analysis, cleaning and analyzing data. You're doing things daily that produce the information that consultants use. Middle career, you specialize. You start to get a little more narrow in the skills that you apply, a little more narrow in the topics that you address, and you start to assume some leadership responsibilities and roles. And then a more mature contributor is going to be more strategic oriented, deciding what services should we provide to our clients, what kinds of organizational changes should we make to stay ahead of our competition. At Leavitt Partners, it looks something like this. Typically take undergraduates as interns. They'll spend a summer with us. We almost exclusively hire out of that intern pool. But it's not exclusive. We do have people that come in directly out of their undergrad, and they come in as junior associates and begin to contribute. They'll continue there in that production orientation for a few years until they have kind of found a niche within the organization, some portion of our business where they really have an interest and they have the capabilities to shine, and then they'll transition into more leadership roles. I'll note that we're hiring now for interns. The kinds of people that we're looking for are folks with analytic skills, but also folks with general, it's a general research skills, the ability to think about information and and consolidate information and convey conclusions about information in meaningful ways. Writing skills cannot be underestimated. Deck building skills cannot be underestimated. And then, of course, analytic skills. Let's see. Leavitt Partners research. So just a moment about this. This is my world. So I built, when I came to Leavitt Partners, I was the second of two people, right, of a team that were real researchers. And my background was in survey research, analytics that I'd picked up here at BYU. And so I started to apply those in my time as an early analyst. Quickly, we realized there's a lot more demand for that, and so we built a team around it. I currently have on our team mostly graduates from graduate schools, folks with PhDs and master's degrees and some technical skills. And so this is where we'd find folks that, statisticians, econometricians, folks with specific analytical skills. We have a diverse background, so I have a social scientist PhD, a PhD in public policy, a PhD in health services research, which is a thing I didn't know about before I started working at Leavitt Partners. And then we have a couple of folks, a statistician and a mathematical analyst. We use data, we house data, and we become the core empirical evidence behind which all of our consultants are operating. So as they go to answer strategic questions for their clients, they're using us to give them evidence to back up what they're saying. I've got a couple of examples here that I'm tempted to go through. Maybe I'll just run through them really, really quick. And by so doing, kind of give you a sense for what a junior associate or a junior analyst might be doing on a project like this. So we did a project not long ago for the Medicaid Managed Care Program in Kansas. And Managed Care Program means that the state is actually contracting out the management of the Medicaid program to external entities. So insurance companies who take on that population, manage that population on behalf of the state. National trend, so we looked at things like what was happening nationally. So a junior analyst might be spending their time researching other states and what they had done and how they've structured their managed care programs and what results they've seen. We ultimately ended the project in a full review of all of the challenges and all of the performance evidence on the program. Every year, there is a program evaluator that releases a 600-page report, technical report on the program, and we had to pour through that report and understand the relevant information and consolidate that. So we had a number of associates, new associates, spending their time reading through this report, looking for important information, pulling that out, and then sending that up the chain to a more experienced consultant who would then organize it into some conclusions. I'm going to walk through all the performance goals here. They're saving a lot of money in Kansas. They're also constraining access to care. So a few takeaways. I'm going to go ahead and stop there, and we've got a few other examples we can talk about if it's interesting, but we've got about 10 minutes left, so why don't we have any questions that anyone wants to ask.
And come to the mic, I think, if you would, please.
Okay. I'm standing right here, so. I just wanted to ask, because I think most of us are poli-sci majors, right? And so right now there's a lot of political kind of intrigue and like questioning around especially like a thing that I've seen a lot is the price of medicine and like the price of healthcare. And what has been your interaction with that in your capacity as a consultant?
So we talk about price a lot, and I'll go back to something I previewed a little bit before. When you shift from a volume-based mentality to a value-based mentality, you also shift the economic centrality of a transaction. In a volume-based mentality, it's a per unit price. And a discussion about that price is between the two entities purchasing. The problem in healthcare is that healthcare violates all 5 of the requirements of a natural market. And so you don't have the same situation that you have in other markets that would ensure that buyers and sellers can come together and meet an equilibrium of price. So the idea is that rather than treating it like a market, which it's not, can we start to think about paying for something differently? And the idea of paying for value suggests let's not give you a price for all of the things that you do or the things that you provide, but let's give you a price for the things that you accomplish. Do you keep people out of the hospital? Are people healthier? Do they reduce their utilization of healthcare services over time? If you're accomplishing those things, those are the things that we want to pay for. So there's a lot of politics around things like price transparency, drug pricing, those kinds of things. It's incredibly complex, and that will continue to be discussed. We think as a firm that while you'll chip away at those conversations and Congress may act to chip away at those conversations, ultimately the movement towards value is what's going to solve that problem. And we're just in the beginning stage. Governor Leavitt likes to say we're 10 years into a 40-year journey on that movement to value.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I would just like to hear more about the time frame that you have with clients. If companies stay with you for long amounts of time, or if they come for just a few months to get services.
Yeah, it's great. So we have, as an organization, maybe 75 or 80 clients, and so it's a really finite number. We tend to have 2 types of clients. We have clients that participate in some sort of membership activity or alliance or something along that lines where there is an ongoing commitment to be part of Leavitt Partners. And we're providing a service that continues ongoing. So those folks, they tend to renew, and we have interactions with them regularly over time. We also have retainer clients that kind of have that same feel where they'll just be on retainer with us to call us and ask us things over time. And then we have project-based work. And project-based work typically runs from several weeks to several months, sometimes longer for big projects. Those clients come in cycles. And so they're our client for a period while they're paying us for a particular project. They might not be paying us for a little while, and then another project will come up. So I would say that of the 75, 80 clients that we have, probably half of them have been with the firm for more than 3 years, and the firm's 10 years old next month, so give you an idea. And the other half have been something less than that, but again, they're either on some sort of cycle or they're staying with us for an effort. I'll give you an example on alliances since we're talking about it. We run an alliance called the Karen Alliance. It's centered around the idea that recent actions have required healthcare providers to make your healthcare data available to you as an individual. Well, it turns out that's really hard. How do you do that? You got this filing cabinet. You can give you a bunch of papers to somebody and say, here's your medical records, right? Or I could plug you into the electronic medical record at the hospital, but you don't have any way to read that file, right? And so there's this making use of that data that becomes a requirement for all providers in the country. So we have 75 organizations or so, which I didn't include in the earlier number, but who are buying into the idea that a national conversation across the provider sector, and including technology and innovation companies, Apple, Google, Amazon are all part of this. These companies have a vested interest in solving the technical problem, even though on a day-to-day basis, they don't like getting around the table together. And so we bring them together and we create an environment in which they can solve a big industry problem. So they'll be on this on an ongoing basis, right? And we'll have relationships with them over an extended period of time.
So do you usually seek out those clients or like within a specific industry, or do they come to
So
you?
for alliances, we come up with the idea. Usually we'll have a seed client, somebody who cares about the idea. Another one we have is on facing addiction. About how to integrate medical and mental health care, specifically around addiction. And you'll have one client who really cares about this and they realize that it's bigger than themselves. You know, the biggest companies in the world can't solve problems on their own. And they'll come to us and say, we've got this idea, and then we will start that operation as an alliance. We'll go out and find other people we think need to be at the table in order to solve this problem. On the project side, which is where I spend more of my time, we're going out and finding those clients. So it's a year-over-year process. I'm involved with the business development process. I probably spend 40% of my time on sales calls, helping clients understand what we could do for them. Early in my career, that lumber was a lot lower, right? So you're more delivering work, but later in your career, you spend a lot more time talking to clients and prospects about what you can do for them.
Awesome, thank you.
Hi.
So
I just had a question about. So there's some stereotypes about political science majors that all of us will graduate knowing a lot about the world, but not have any real, actually marketable skills. And whether or not that's true, subject to debate. But I guess I had wanted to ask, for us being at the early stage of our career development and needing to be skill-based contributors, what do you see as the most important skills for us to be working on? I still have, for me in my position, I still have a year before I'll graduate, and there's a lot of open slots in my schedule that I could be focusing on things like building out, programming languages, R, database management, SQL kind of things, or focusing more on, writing and analysis. What do you see as, for us as undergrads, what skills can we develop to bring to the table?
that's a great question, and maybe not the answer that Quinn thinks I'm going to give here, but I think that I'm going to use the term technical skills, but I'm going to use it a lot broader than you might be thinking. So technical skills often we think are things like data analytics or data management, those kinds of things. All of those are very relevant. If you have the greater number of the greater command of technical skills that you have, the better you are. As a social science student, you're likely to get a good exposure to a lot of those. You can continue to build those skills through your undergraduate, but you will be just tipping the iceberg of what you'll need to perform in your career.
Right.
And so that just a realism there is build those, and if you want to make those part of your future career, realize that that's going to be a continued process after you get hired in. More likely that the immediate technical people right out of college, they're going to come out of computer science programs or math programs, those kinds of things. That said, there's a broader set of technical skills that I think are really important and are unique to social scientists. And it has to do with the research process and the presentation of evidence. If you can learn to write technically, understanding the analytics that goes into answering questions and how to actually interpret that analysis in the context of some narrative, those are skills that would be immediately useful. One of the biggest struggles we have is finding people that we can give a set of information to and have them consolidate that information into a cohesive narrative that we can then immediately give to a client without having to go through several levels of review. So do not underestimate the power of the writing skills that you're gaining as a social science major.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a great answer, by the way.
Yeah.
And could I just supplement that? You probably already noticed that there were 8